Right, it's 5 Unscripted with Qaanitah Hunter, one of the youngest news editors in the country. Qaanitah, welcome. First of all, thank you so much for honoring the invitation.
Thank you very much for having me. It's really nice to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm always interested in people's, I like to call it origin stories. I know you're not a Marvel comic supervillain or anything like that.
Who knows?
Who knows, right?
Yeah, I can't do no small talk, no small talk. I'm not with the small talk. Can't be with the small talk.
Where did it all start for you? Who's Qaanitah? What keeps her going?
That's a loaded one. Let's start. So I am a politics editor. I'm 29 years old at the moment.
I'm 28. Thank you so much for making me feel good about myself. Thank you.
I'm not an ageist. I said to you offline that I feel 52. I feel like I've lived a good 4 lives.
And having tracked your career, I can definitely agree. Yeah.
So I started in journalism in the beginning of 2011. I was 18 years old.
Sure.
I had come straight from writing my matric, got into a bus, and I just wanted to be a journalist. I was one of those people from the time I was 6 years old, 5 years old, knew that I wanted to do politics. I wanted to write politics. I knew that that's just what I wanted to do. I would spend days with, in front of a mirror with my mother's hairbrush, pretending I was a news anchor or a news reporter for a TV station. So I was always fascinated. I grew up with newspapers and the radio. And so that's what took over my preoccupation as a child, just learning politics and reading about, the arms deal. That fascinated me. And, just listening to international developments at the time on BBC Radio, listening to SFM in the morning, as many of us, growing up, that was, a daily routine. And it was something that growing up, I never ever imagined a wedding, or I never ever imagined, people imagine university or imagine going on fancy holidays. I never ever had that in my imagination. I just imagined being a journalist and, working as a journalist and traveling the world as a journalist. And that literally preoccupied my whole life until, I was 18 years old. I would badger every news editor or any editor whose email address I could come across, send them emails, beg them to give me opportunities. One sucker decided to say, okay, fine, here's an opportunity. And I pretty much learned along the way. And I've been covering politics, like I said, it's almost 12 years now. And it's crazy to see where life has taken me. I've reported all over the world. I've written some books now, and it's a full circle moment when I look at where I am versus, there's a story that I share about how I came to Joburg with this cheap bus ticket, and this one pair of pink sparkly shoes. And
I think everybody has a Joburg story.
Everybody has a Joburg story.
Yeah.
And it always includes surviving on 2-minute noodles for a long time.
Sure.
I cannot eat 2-minute noodles anymore. It's for that reason. But it's I'd come to Joburg literally. When I think about it, I sit and I think, where were the adults? Where were the adults looking at me and saying, what are you doing, girl? Because I had no intention to go to university. I had no intention. I just wanted to work as a journalist. And studying was secondary. Thankfully, I did get an education.
Of course.
But studying was secondary. Life was secondary. It was just this kind of preoccupation of wanting to be a political journalist. And, I get to Joburg, get to Park Station. I don't think I even turned 17. No, I was not 18. I was 17. And I was, my bag was cut open and my wallet was stolen. That was my grand introduction to Joburg.
Baptism of fire.
No, proper baptism of fire. And, I was pretty much a sucker in terms, or the ideal victim when it comes to Joburg crime. And so pickpocketing, it was routine. At some point I got used to it because I was Joburg CBD. There's this could have been 2013. I was walking at the Bree taxi rank. I had my laptop bag on my back, and I had a satchel, my phone in my satchel, and I think I was walking like I'd come back from work, but it was taking a public transport, and this guy obviously could see this. This is an easy target here, right?
Sure. It's like they can smell. They're like bloodhounds.
Yeah, they're just like, this is an easy target here. And this guy comes to me and he's like, give me your phone. And I just, in the adrenaline of the moment, so I had this, this heavy Lenovo laptops, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I take my bag off and I just start hitting the guy. And I'm like, this guy could have killed me. But I was like, at that point, I was like, I am done, Joburg.
Absolutely.
I'm done. You had your laugh. You had your laugh. You're not going to get the best. No, you're not doing this to me anymore. and then I just had a smooth sailing ride after that.
You had to toughen up real quick. So, Qaanitah, you've come a long way from battling petty criminals in Johannesburg. You now have got this, what I consider a pretty illustrious career. Like I said before, you're one of the youngest political editors in this country, and not just any publication, arguably the biggest online news publication in the country. But interestingly, you had your start in radio, a medium I'm very, very passionate about.
Yeah.
Explain that to me. And the end game was obviously to become a journalist. Was the plan to maybe become a newsreader and then maybe have your own talk show, or maybe use the radio as like a launching pad to a career in print?
So I was never married to the medium of how I was going to practice my craft as a political journalist. It was radio, it was television, it was anything. Until today, I maintain that approach. And I'll say this: I believe that there are those, very gifted people who, they have this amazing on-camera presence, or they have this amazing, like yourself, radio presence.
Thank you.
And people who are just really talented with words. And I feel like not all of us have that just innate talent. And for me, it was a thing that you can work and develop and hone your skills, and if you give it enough attention. And so I started off at radio. I think radio is incredible. I think it has such a powerful impact on listeners, and the influence is just extraordinary. But I always wanted to try my hand at everything, and that's what I still do today. And then you realize as you go along that you become better at some things over others. So, I will still remember when I dabbled into television, live crossings, the words would just not come out of your mouth. And I just believe this. I believe if you're not good at something, keep doing it. Just keep doing it, as long as someone allows you to keep doing it, right? Because if you're awful, then there's some editor that's like, get off air. But that's how I've approached it, to say, okay, why not? So you want to anchor news? Sure, anchor news. Learn along the way. Listen to people. And I think most of my education came that way, of finding people whose work I absolutely enjoy, and kind of trying to find my style in mimicking them, at least from, just a style perspective, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the same way that's how I learned writing, because writing is really, really difficult. And I mean, just writing news reports is one thing, but, dabbling to features, just in the last 3 years, I've been writing a lot of a weekly column, and just finding your voice in the space has been an incredibly difficult journey for me. But I feel now, maybe 3 years after doing it every single week, I'm at a phase where I can say, okay, I found my voice, and my voice is unlike a lot of the people whose work I admire and I look up to, but I use that as a guide to eventually find my voice. And so my voice is not a 51-year-old man, but it's, I'm able to now be comfortable in a little bit of my silliness, but taking on very serious topics, bringing a little bit of, what they call sort of youthful energy to serious topics. But the point is that even now, I do not want to ever box myself into any form of, over-encompassing or just this sort of all-encompassing, rather, label. Because we can do podcasts, we can do videos, we can host live shows, and I can write a column, and I can manage a team, and we can do it all. I truly believe that. And you may suck at one thing. And that's the thing about me, Thabo. I was never afraid of sucking at anything. Because I'm like, eventually I won't suck at it, and then joke's on you.
Sure. One thing that's very fascinating, I find particularly fascinating about your career, partly is the debut. This was in 2011. This was during what has now been called infamously the 9 wasted years, right? And I want to know, how was it navigating the news space then, not just as a consumer, but as a journalist, navigating the news cycle? You've got Diary, you've got all these stories. How was that like? That must have been pretty tumultuous.
Yeah, so, I mean, I knew that I always wanted to do politics. So that was very easy for me. There was a very specific beat that I already knew that I loved and knew a lot about and would read and consume and watch. And so I knew the players as a consumer of news, right? And so I come to Joburg. I'm young. So initially when I started, my primary job was news reading and production. But I would finish early like you do, right? So you finish, and then so my afternoons would be free. So I would beg the station manager to say, can I go to Lutuli House and maybe just cover this 2:00 press briefing? And I don't even know how to cover it, because I'm just like, how does this recorder work? That type of thing. Literally learning along the way. And so there was many things that kind of counted against me. The first was I was super young. I was a child. And so, there was that disdain, not only from newsmakers, but from peers who would just be like, who are you and why are you here? The fact that I wore hijab just was never, and I say this with so much of gratitude, it was never a form of discrimination, but rather that kind of a sense of othering, to be like, who are you? This is unfamiliar to us. Just the fact that you're a female also just creates that level of othering in some way. But, I had this attitude to say, I didn't deserve to be there. I was not even graduated. I had a matric certificate, right? So I'm like, every day I'm just going to try it out. And if it doesn't work, I'll try again tomorrow. And then if they eventually find me to be a fraud, well, So that was my attitude. And I think it became my superpower, because what happened was I was able to take risks because I had almost nothing to lose, right?
Sure.
So I'd ask for an interview, and I was told no, and then I asked again, and then I was told yes, and then I'd get a great interview, and then it would be just amazing. And then the Guptas came along.
I wonder who are those?
So there was a time in my bio that I would say Qaanitah Hunter thanks Jacob Zuma for her career. Mm-hmm. I truly do, right? Because there was so much happening. People needed people to run around and cover things. Julius Malema was being fired from the ANC. There was think about 2011.
What a throwback.
Yes.
What a throwback.
And there I was running in Seshego, marching from Joburg CBG to Pretoria. Remember that?
Which one is that?
There was an economic freedom march in our lifetime. Julius led it from Joburg, walking all the way to Pretoria.
Oh my goodness, I think I remember that.
Almost overnight. I'll never forget that. And what happened was I just was truly thrust into it until I started working for the New Age. And you know what?
The Gupta-owned newspaper.
They have done many things wrong in their life, but giving an 18-year-old, they probably shouldn't have given an 18-year-old opportunity to be a journalist in hindsight, with a matric certificate. It was child labor on their side. It really worked out well for me.
And listen, you took it and ran with it.
I took it and I ran with it.
Absolutely.
And what that did was it exposed me at a very young age to have access to really high-level politicians and to develop relationships. And so I was 19 and I was full-time assigned to former President Zuma. So I would go everywhere with them to the point where, because I almost looked so unassuming, I always looked lost and like not knowing what's going on, his security would always be chilled with me, and I would always doorstop until I became known to be that journalist who gets the best doorstops with the president.
Incredible.
Because nobody would suspect that. Like, I was not, like just pushing my mic out there or anything of that sort. But I mean, I knew that I wanted to do investigative journalism and I wanted to be a serious political journalist. And I think by that time, I really, really, really enjoyed the print medium. But when I was doing print, I was doing television as well. So there was never a time in my career, I can't think of a time in my career where I've only stuck to one medium. So when I eventually got to the Sunday Times, or even when I was at the Mail and Guardian, when I would be doing, a 1,000-word interview piece for print, I would always be considering multimedia. I would considering social media, for example. And so I think that's the advantage me and you have as the younger generation of journalism, is that it's not so monolithic anymore, and we're able to express ourselves really in a way that allows us to experiment. And I think if there's a gift that I have to look back and say this was a gift to me and my career, was the space to explore. And I know lots of people don't get that, right? To just try it. Why not?
And make mistakes.
I've made some mistakes in my life. And I think when you have this attitude that all you can do is ask, the worst that can happen is no. Nothing really stops you. I know my late mother used to say, she's like, I worry about you. And I say, why? She's like, you literally will ask anyone for anything. I worry that you'll ask a man to marry you and he says no and you'll just be completely fine. And I'm like, yeah, I think I would be.
On to the next one. But I love that for you.
Thank you, next.
There you go. But I do love that for you. The fact that, you were given sort of carte blanche to, listen, make mistakes, prosper, make mistakes, prosper.
But I mean, it wasn't that silver spoon in my mouth type of entitlement, oh, you can do whatever you want. It was because you're doing what we want you to do well and you're doing it promptly. Whatever you do in whatever other, if you want to be a workaholic and work from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., then do it.
But essentially working for the Guptas, it was almost like a front row seat to the beginning of state capture.
Absolutely.
Did that in any way fuel your, I guess, your drive to actually use journalism as this kind of tool for change in any way?
I think so. And I think I did have like kind of a front row. I mean, a lot of us who worked in those stables in those years, like sort of the 2013, where things, it was still the Waterkloof landing for the Sun City wedding and that type of thing. And I remember when I had left and I moved to Mail and Guardian, and we were obviously doing a lot of stories exposing the Guptas and the Zuma corruption nexus. And I got an SMS from someone who was very high up in the Gupta establishment saying, you're so ungrateful, we gave you a shot. And there were times where I thought, truly I wouldn't have had a career, or I wouldn't have this type of career had it not been someone just taking a chance on a child, basically, right? But I think if anything, it proved to me that our commitment is to journalism, not to the employer. And if tomorrow my current boss, or if tomorrow my current editor, or if I am guilty of any wrongdoing, somebody must expose that. But what it really did for me is that because it was sort of a weird terrain in that not many people wanted to work for the Guptas. Sure. It exposed me and gave me a lot of great opportunity, and I don't ever take that away from the experience. Sure. It was not all awful, and thankfully I was able to come out on the other side and build a formidable career that was not linked to as Gupta girl, as the RET bots on Twitter really liked. They're like, don't forget you used to work for the Guptas, and I'm like, absolutely. Do you want to know how much they paid me? It was a slave wage, not the amounts we see at the Zondo Commission.
Absolutely. And we all know this is somewhat dark, right? But we all know that the press in this country is under siege.
Yeah.
We see it all the time. And you are in no safer position being a political journalist. Unfortunately, you've become a target to all sorts of things. And
Do you see the Twitter?
I've seen I've seen the tweets. I mean, for a couple of years now, but I remember there was a year where you were subjected to some pretty vitriolic stuff on social media. How in the world did you not quit? I don't know what I would have done. I don't think I would have survived that.
I mean, 2016, 2017 was probably the worst of it all, right?
Yeah.
So I was one of those journalists that was the victim of the Bell Pottinger misinformation,
PR scandal,
disinformation
yes.
campaign, and my face was photoshopped on naked images, on pornography. It was I was doxxed. I was rape threats, death threats, and again, the thing of being othered becomes the thing that's used to bully you. Like, you are this curry eating, because of the sort of shade of my skin, and it became all sorts of attacks. I mean, sometimes I don't like thinking about it.
I'm sorry.
But what happened to me is I was subject to this, and my seniors had not really had any real experience dealing with this type of thing, because remember, their era, you didn't have this real-time social media attacks. So like the anxiety that I would get from a Friday to a Sunday, because I was working at the Sunday Times at the time, was insane, because even though there was a team of us working on these stories, I was the one that was getting attacks. And so it persisted and persisted, and I actually, was diagnosed with depression. And then I took a step back and I said, okay, if this is happening to me and no one can really help me because no one can really understand it, let me try to understand it. And I did my honors dissertation on the Gupta Bell Pottinger scandal, just to understand what is the nexus of this, how does it work. And I literally it was my entire focus was understanding the weaponization of social media and its consequences on mental health, to the point where now in 2022, I literally go and speak all over the world about the consequence of that, the importance of mental health. I'm currently doing my master's on mental health and journalism, because I just felt like I needed to use my experience to empower me. The fact that now the South African National Editors Forum has a dedicated subcommittee that's dealing with wellness and mental health. 2 weeks ago, we were doing a 2-day program where we're just training young journalists in mental health, sensitivities and etc. And so what I did was I said, okay, if this is happening to me, it's happening to a lot of other people. And so I started speaking about it on social media. I said, this has been my experience. I had literally senior editors, Thabo, the ones that you like were in awe of your entire life, and they're just like these larger than life, sending me messages to say, I have been battling alcoholism for so many years. I had no way to get help. And we've normalized it, this bravado that comes with journalism, and it's multiple fold, right? So it's on one hand, it's the bravado of like, just go out there and just
break the story.
Sure. And then it's the thing where you have no life and you live actually an unhealthy life because you're working all the time, right? I was saying to someone yesterday, a friend of mine, we walk every day together, and she has nothing to do with journalism. I don't know if she even ever reads the newspaper, right? She is like the most furthest thing away from the news. She does not pay attention to politics, and we walk every day. And she kind of has a closer sense of what my day looks like. So I have this gap that I've made it, every day I have to walk for at least 45 minutes. So either it's in the morning or in the afternoon, but it has to happen. And so yesterday she ended up staying much later, and she sees me continue working, and she's like, so what time do you knock off? And this was say 6 p.m., right? So I'd taken a break from 5 to 6 p.m., right? And I'm like, that was my lunch break. My day ends when my day ends. And so we've normalized all of these things. And, I did an interview once where at a radio station, and there was another senior editor there, and we're talking about mental health and journalism, and he's like, oh yeah, we covered the state of emergency in the 80s, and we covered the violence in the townships in the early 90s, and we fine. I'm like, no honey, you're not fine. You have alcoholism. You have you have problems. He's like, yeah, this is millennial tears. I'm like, you just needed therapy, honey. Your life? Yeah, you just needed therapy.
And it's a pandemic on its own within the journalism industry, because you got some pretty heavy stuff.
Absolutely. And it's like I said, it's not only the covering of what we do. It's you have, first of all, you have this front row seat to the underbelly of this country, and this country is an extreme sport, right?
Sure.
So you see all sorts of things. The nature of the job, that you cannot just shirk it off. It's not a job you leave at this building and continue with your day.
That's so true. You take it home with you
everywhere you go.
Absolutely.
And then added to that is the level of harassment, intimidation. And so what I decided to do is saying, okay, what can I do to help myself? And in helping myself, I can help others. And so the first thing was the awareness part of it. And in 2019, the South African National Editors Forum awarded me with the Nat Nakasa Award for bravery, just to have started that conversation around mental health in a way that's, and now where we are in 2022, I'm like, we're done with the awareness. Mental health is a media freedom issue. Why? Because people have just realized that if you attack journalists in the way that you have, right? Karen Moore, my colleague,
incredible journalist.
You see what she's subjected to on a daily basis, right?
Absolutely.
So what's the easiest thing to say? I can't tolerate this anymore. I'm going to give up. And that's censorship, right? That's self-censorship. And that's what they want. And so now it's like my personal mission to find ways to protect the mental health of journalists, to talk about it, to find mechanisms of early intervention, to build resilience. I speak to students about it. I speak to editors about it. Thankfully, I'm part of the South African National Editors Forum. I've done work with the African Women in Media organization in the continent, and I said, if anything, cyber misogyny is the new thing, right? Why do we as women journalists, and you probably see it with your female colleagues, there'll be 5 people presenting a show, but they'll attack the woman on what she's wearing.
She's always the target.
Absolutely. And I'm like, no, we're gonna do something. And it's a thing about like being proactive. What can I do? So yes, I'm doing my master's on it, and Thabo, it needs to end.
How long has it been?
It's been a while. It's not.
You'll get there. You'll get there.
Yes.
I know it's tough.
But I mean, my day job is just killing all of my other ambitions.
I can imagine.
but the point is, I think that's what fuels me. The ability to just say, okay, I'm in this space. I have this unique opportunity. I also have the privilege of having a seat at a lot of tables. So, like, what can we do? Well,
you've got this massive platform.
Yeah.
And you talk about media freedom. What role do you think the media plays in exposing? For me, I think corruption is a pandemic on its own in this country.
Yeah.
Because of what we see. I mean, President Cyril Ramaphosa said it a number of times. He makes mention of it, with the findings of the State of Capture Commission report, whether it's the Public Protector's report, the initial Public Protector's report. I'm thinking of Chilima Donsala Ngandla, for example. Yeah. Talk to me about the role the media plays, and why is it often so underestimated?
What we do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, think about what those 9 years under Zuma was. All state entities, let's say, except the judiciary, had been completely paralyzed and hollowed out. And literally it was the media that was keeping this democracy alive. Let's be honest about it. The Zondo Commission says as much. The legislature was completely useless. the criminal justice system was completely hollowed out during that time.
I mean, the NPA at the time was led by Sean Abrams.
Absolutely.
If I'm not, yeah.
And I mean, and not only it was, we had Burning and Clemens had the Hawks, we had, but the point is that it was completely crippled and broken. And so, when we talk about the great role the media played in uncovering state capture, you have to realize that it at the cost that it came with, it was not easy. We can valorize it now and we can talk about it. It was not easy. What you're up against a sitting president. You're up against entire state machinery that would do everything to subvert our work as journalists. And that's what makes me continue, and no matter how difficult the day is, no matter how much I want to quit and be a housewife, applications are open.
You can dream, right?
Maybe that's my 30s, but the point is that it's truly a thing that feeds me to say we truly are doing democracy work. We are literally, I still laugh with colleagues of mine who do phenomenal work, Thando Jiga and Sabela Skita, is to say, the corruption busters are in the house. And really, a lot of what our state entities ought to be doing, the media has been doing for all of these years. What happens a little bit, which I worry about, is you become jaded also a little, because you uncover it's 5 million, it's 11 million, it's 20 million, it's 150 million, it's 2 billion. We wrote a story about 5 billion just disappearing from one of the entities in higher education. And can I tell you, Thabo, it was 5 billion rand. It was probably the 10th top story for the day. Not even, maybe 15th.
We've become so desensitized to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how much was stolen in the COVID-19 pandemic.
PPEs, of course, the scandals.
And there was like this kind of you think about like people we dealing with these junkies, and you're like, okay, that was just marijuana. It's not the
deep stuff. It's not the heroin or the man.
It's not the heroin or the Mandrax.
Sure.
So that's the level of and what worries me? What worries me is because not only becoming desensitized as journalists, but we're becoming desensitized as South Africans. We're becoming apathy is for me the biggest thing that scares me, because people are just like, oh, these people are going to be corrupt anyways. And so yesterday, Rivonia Circle, which is a political think tank, released this survey that they did. And they were like, people, and they go and they do lots of democracy work around the country. And they're saying, people are disillusioned with the ANC, but they're disillusioned with politics too. And I'm like, that's it, right? So people are just actually tapping out of the system.
Sure.
And that is more dangerous than whatever happens at the ANC conference in December, because at the end of the day, what's going to happen is democracy is going to be this thing of like the few million people that actually show up to vote, and everyone else will be like, well,
nobody cares anymore.
We'll just do what we can and continue along.
Well, but I think you've been doing such phenomenal work, despite the circumstances, what you've had to experience. You and so many other incredible journalists, spoke about Karen Morn earlier. But finally, what's next for Qaanitah Hunter? I know you're an author, right?
Yes.
You're an author. I read one of your books.
No, but that's the worst book that you could read. I was 19 years old when I read it.
I know.
I used to read it. I used to write it. I wrote that book. Diary of a Gucci Girl, while using public transport in the morning before work every day. Funny
enough, I used to read this in the How train. I'm not kidding. So you've written other books.
Yes.
What are they called again?
So Balance of Power, Ramaphosa and the Future of South Africa. That book came out in 2019. It was basically how Ramaphosa was elected and the story of how he became president. And then last year in 2021, we had written a book, which I'm very proud of. 8 Days in July. It was a bestseller.
Oh yes, I remember that.
Yes. We literally wrote it in a month, and it is. I'm gonna punt myself in a way that I don't usually do, but it is a really, really good effort at bringing investigative journalists, because we had hundreds and hundreds of leaked intelligence documents, but then with the human element, because we wanted to humanize it. We all lived through the July unrest, so that was a phenomenal experience. So what's next for me? I want... So this is what I imagined for my lifetime.
Okay.
This study filled with books, completely untidy.
What kind of books?
Like the pretentious books, not the books you read. You know the ones you see on television when people do interviews.
Oh, Great Gatsby and something very intellectual.
One that you never read, right?
Got it.
But like just with this beautiful background. But like my desk will be completely messy, just cups of coffee everywhere, and like 3 screens open, some like tearings of newspapers, writing fiction. Political fiction.
Political fiction, that should be good.
Because you've got a good reference. Are you kidding me? The 9 wasted years, money in the sofa. You've got incredible reference.
But you know the problem in South Africa when we try to fictionalize politics for like those soapies that try to like venture into politics, it never is as good as the real thing. Our politics is like A-grade movies.
It's telenovela style. I've always said it. It's very telenovela style. It's like something you expect to be fictionalized when it isn't.
Yeah, but on a serious note, I am working really, really, really hard on 5 different streams of things. One is mental health. I don't know how. Maybe you and I can collaborate, but we need to do something about mental health. Not only in journalism. Journalism is where I have a level of influence, and that's what I'm using. But conversations on mental health is something that's the next thing that I focus my life and my attention to. And I always speak about my journey with my dad having schizophrenia, and that's something that I've just decided to use my experience to help others. Getting people reading. I don't know how I'm going to do that.
We do have a huge literacy problem.
We have a huge literacy problem.
Absolutely.
And so we can write these books, but if we're not getting the majority of South Africans reading, what's the point?
It's pointless. Absolutely.
So that's something. Again, these are pet projects. The other thing is I want to run a marathon. I don't know how.
You have to start very small though.
No, come down. I don't. When I said I wanted to, on my first day as an 18-year-old, said I want to be an award-winning journalist. Someone said you got to start small. I said to them, jump. No, I want to run a marathon.
Okay.
So
like a Soweto marathon. Our producer actually does Soweto marathon.
Yeah, like 42K.
Okay, that's a good distance to do. Yeah, I'll cheer you on from the side.
You look skeptical. The next time we sit here, I'm going to bring my medal. I don't know how I'm going to do that.
And you know what? I know you're definitely going to prove me wrong. Okay, marathon. And what else?
Marathon. Like I said, I want to write fiction. I'm not good at writing fiction, but that is the incentive. I will get good at it.
No. You absolutely are good at writing fiction. Your books proves it.
And then I was set on traveling to 30 countries before 30. I've exceeded 30, but I've repeated some countries. So I have I think 3 more to go to. So my 30th birthday is next year July. So I have three.
Got a couple of months to go. Okay.
But traveling telling stories from across the continent. You get those people who are just cliche and say, oh, I love the African. No, I truly love the African. I think I just came back from Europe last month, and truly that feeling of like what the continent offers in terms of what other places in the world offer is just worlds apart. We have a vibrancy that you cannot compare to anything else. And yeah, that's where I am.
Qaanitah, thank you so much for taking the time to come here. I really, really appreciate it, and really good luck with everything. And I know you're going to fulfill you're going to tick all those boxes. The 30 countries, the fictional stories, and I'll be there, standing in line at the bookstore to buy your book.
But you won't believe that I'm going to run the marathon.
We'll come back, okay? We'll come back, and you'll probably prove me wrong, but we'll see.
Yeah, I can't do no small talk, no small talk. I'm not with the small talk. Can't be with the small talk.